Welcome. Thanks for waiting. We had another technical difficulty moment today, so hopefully here we are. Unfortunately, we also had scheduled Paul and Eric to join me here today, and both of them have some conflicts. Paul's got something going on with his computer, so you got me today. I hope that's enough. So anyway, the question comes up quite often. Who do we work for? Where does our number one loyalty lie? And the answer is with our clients, and virtually always. And I say virtually because I'm going to point out one instance where we do have some latitude, and that is where a client wants us to do something that is illegal or unethical. And illegal might be something about having some information, a material fact, for example, and we've covered this on other live streams, where we have some information that might be a material fact, but we choose not to disclose that, or the seller chooses not to disclose it, and they want us to not tell anyone about it. For example, water in the basement. They get 2 feet of water in the basement every third Tuesday, and they don't want you to tell anyone about it. They want you to keep it on the down low. Well, we can't do that. Our occupational code and our license laws require that anything that is a material fact be disclosed honestly and forthrightly. So, that's one area, and sometimes they will ask us, to do something just outright illegal as well, which is, maybe not following through on a contract and wanting us to lie for them. Well, we can't necessarily lie, but on the other hand, we don't always have to tell all of the details. Sometimes agents will get on and say, hey, my buyer has decided that the interest rate is going to be higher than they expected, their monthly payment is going to be different, so they want to get out of the contract. Well, that's not a term of the contract. So sometimes saying less is more, in that you might be able to use the inspection contingency as a way for them to get out of the contract if you haven't passed that inspection window. But bear in mind, the moment that we tell the other party what our plan is, we've just laid our cards on the table. We can't retract that now and say, well, no, never mind. We're going to go ahead with the transaction, and we're going to use the inspection contingency, and with the intention, of course, to use the inspection contingency to get out of the contract. That's not going to work. So when we start looking at what our duties are to our clients as it relates to the law of agency and the disclosure of material facts and latent defects on the property that we may or may not know, but we might suspect, we have to remember that our duty is to our clients. We have to maintain their confidentiality, and we have to disclose things to our clients which we come to learn in the process of a transaction, or even before, that we would then share with our clients. We have a duty to disclose them. So for example, let's say that you are showing a house to some buyers. You've got these buyers under contract. They're your clients, and they say, well, help me understand if there's been water in the basement. Now let's pretend, just for sake of argument, that you know very well that there's water in the basement. You had the house listed, or may have been called out on a listing appointment for the house before it was listed. Are you precluded from telling that new buyer the information about the water in the basement? And the answer is no, you're not precluded. You're not prohibited from telling them that, because you discovered that in the course of another transaction. But let's take this a little bit different and say, you know that the sellers are getting a divorce. That's confidential information. Are you allowed to share that confidential information in any subsequent relationship with a buyer or another seller, for example? And the answer is no. You have to maintain that confidentiality that you had established in that prior relationship. When you have an agency relationship and you have disclosed information within that relationship, information disclosed to you, you have to carry that so long, again, as it doesn't involve a material fact and it's not unlawful to not share it. If it is in confidence, you have a responsibility to share that information. For example, you know that a house got an offer on the property. Your listing got an offer. When it was listed with you, maybe the offer was, let's say, $200,000, just for grins. It was $200,000. Now they have listed the property for $250,000, and you had the property listed before, and now you are showing it to another buyer at the price, listed price of $250,000. Do you have a right to tell that buyer, who is now your client, what your prior client was willing to consider within that time frame, within that prior listing? And the answer is no. You have to be very, very careful where your lines are drawn. Another circumstance that we run into is when agents take a listing and they go out and they spend a bunch of money on photos and videos, staging, brochures, setting up an open house, making a bunch of calls, walking a neighbor, whatever you do to market your properties. And then after a while, the seller decides, well, I'm going to quit. I don't want you as my agent anymore. Does that listing agent have a right within the terms of the contract, the listing contract, to be reimbursed for their costs? Well, that's a hard question to answer, and for a couple of reasons. Number one is 5 Star as a company doesn't make it a practice of suing its own clients, nor should agents, in our opinion. However, there are some legitimate circumstances where a seller will, send you down a rabbit hole, and you spend a bunch of money on the basis that they're going to do something, whether it's to price the home differently, and then you're acting in good faith to go out and create all of those marketing materials. Do you have the right to go back and sue that client? Maybe. And maybe is a gray area, as you can understand. It depends on how clear the language was, or how clear you made the contract to them as to whether or not you have any legal grounds to go back and sue the client. In other words, did you specifically state in language within the contract that if they terminated the contract early, that you would be reimbursed for your expenses? Or were you going on the basis of it was implied, it was, hey, we've got a contract? That's probably not going to be sufficient in a court of law to prevail as to whether or not you're going to get reimbursed for your expenses. Sometimes agents can and do put their commission in front of the best interests of the seller. And this is where it gets really dicey, and agents can sometimes find themselves not only in front of a grievance committee of their local board, but they may also find themselves in front of Lara trying to explain themselves. So when you're walking down this path with your client, and you've either got their house listed or you've sold a house to them as their buyer's agent, and something happens within that transaction to cause it to cause either party to want to bail out of the contract. As their agent and broker, it is our job to make sure that we represent what the client wants, whatever that might be. So long as it's not illegal. So, for example, if they say to you, well, I want you to, if you don't terminate my listing because you refuse to discriminate on the basis of a protected class, so therefore I want to terminate my listing. Well, that's illegal. And so you don't have to terminate your listing under that circumstance. And they can take us to the court and we'll back you 100% on that. Now, If they say to you, well, we want to raise the price. We've had it now at $350,000 for like 6 weeks. We haven't got any offers. We've gotten almost no showings, but we're really sure that if we raise the price to 425, go ahead and laugh, okay, that we're going to get a bunch of showings. Well, you and I both know that that's not true. Nevertheless, we have a duty to do as they ask. Sometimes our clients will ask us to put an addendum together, asking for extreme things like, let's throw in the John Deere tractor and the lawn furniture and in the jungle gym that sits outside, and all of that sort of stuff. And even though we know that that's probably going to kill the deal, it doesn't open up the contract. The only thing that opens up a contract, by the way, is paragraph 15 as it relates to inspections. So, but let's say that they throw out an addendum. Do we have to fill that out and send that to the listing agent? And the answer is yeah. We owe our clients obedience, again, so long as it does not violate any laws or ethics. So I'm going to ask for any questions here. It might be a little bit short today because I know that Paul and Greg had some things, or Paul and Eric had some things they wanted to add, but couldn't join us today. So if you have any questions here, put them in there. We'll answer them as the day goes on. But when you consider what our responsibilities are to our client comes first always, unless they're asking us to do something illegal or unethical. And I challenge you that when somebody says, well, that's illegal or that's unethical, there has to be a standard for it. It can't just be, your opinion that it's illegal or unethical. There has to be a basis for it. Otherwise, we are bound by agency law, which, as many of you know, I use an acronym old CAR, obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, and accounting of funds, and reporting. And you have to report to what your information is. So if you get in a situation where, let's say you think you've spent $2,000 on marketing materials, you'd better be able to prove that if you intend to go after them for it. And it better be in your listing contract that specifically says, if the seller terminates this offer, seller agrees to reimburse the listing agent for any and all expenses incurred in marketing, for example. So I hope that's clear. I hope that gives a little bit of an insight into the whole question of agency and where our responsibilities lie. Again, if you have any questions, post them here, and hopefully next week we'll have a couple more guests for you. Thanks for joining. Have a great day.